thank you. You are too kind. You haven't even seen the content yet, and you are already giving me applause. So, can you hear me? No? Let's see if I can hear you. Are you energized? You are a bunch of liars, but that's fine. Let's fake it until you make it, right? So, it's the second half of the event. I cannot hold a grudge of you if I see you sleeping, but all right. So there are two words in the title of my presentation that might be a little bit alien to some people. The first one is SAP, the name of the company I work for. How many people haven't heard about that before? Raise your hands. Wow. No, if you haven't heard about SAP, raise your hands. Everybody, wow, that's good. That's good. So maybe I will quiz you. Who knows? And what about InnerSource? How many of you have not heard about InnerSource before? All right, few people, okay. Yeah, that's nice. Well, don't worry, I'll talk a little bit about that anyway. So about the, I think I'm gonna have to improvise. Something is not working. That's fine. The agenda for today, I'll do, as I said, a quick introduction about InnerSource and SAP. We'll also talk about what we have done so far for the topic. Well, it's how we are driving it. I will talk about where we are now, so where did the things that we do land us, let's say, and then give you an outlook of what we plan to do into the future. So, yeah, no clicker yet. I don't know why I did that, but quick intro. And there? No, don't worry. I can do it like this. All right, so first definition of what InnerSource is. InnerSource is the use of open source software development practices and the establishment of an open source-like culture within organizations. There are many definitions out there. This one is one of my favorites because it also focuses on the adoption of the open source culture within the organization. But as with many definitions, they are very useful, they are very concise, but they also have some shortcomings. Like for you to understand what InnerSource is, it depends on your understanding what the open source software development practices are, and also what the open source culture is. And so to make that a little bit more tangible, I put a set of things here that usually we expect these InnerSource projects to do or to adopt. So first, as in open source, we expect them to have the source code visible, but not to the whole world, but within an organization. We also expect them to accept contributions from other teams. Although you can see, like in open source, some open source projects don't accept contributions. So is that really a requirement? Well, that's up to debate, right? But we also expect them then, if they accept contributions, to also have very good developer documentation available to everybody who wants to contribute. We expect them to have good contribution guidelines. We expect them to have a transparent vision and roadmaps to avoid that pull request that doesn't really fit and is going to cause some friction, right? And we also expect them to have transparent change request tracking. So if you are taking bug reports of bugs or requesting of new features, you want everybody to be able to see that and not create yet another the same feature request, but interact with the one that already exists. And of course, we want people to try to communicate as much as possible in open forums. Like everybody here has been in a mail thread that was a bit too long and confusing and left out some people in the reply to and all that. So instead, let's try to do it in the open so that people coming from the community later, they can also see that. Yeah? So to make it a different type of tangible, I like to draw things a little bit. This is a bit small maybe for the people in the back, but I have a zoomed out version. I like to think of InnerSource as going from what you see in the left here to what you see in the right. And to make it easier, what you see or what you saw on the left before, it's how I see the relationship between stakeholders and an internal software way before InnerSource. That's the very opaque thing. You don't see anything beyond the software. And then you can ask those questions like, who is maintaining it? Who else is using it or reusing it? How do I report bugs? How to request features? Where is the documentation? Where is the source code? If you're coming from open source, that's kind of mostly given. But inside a company, that's not always the case. And InnerSource is the exact opposite of that, right? You go to this situation here where you don't use just an opaque software, but you see something else. You see a project behind that software. You see the people who are doing it. You can reach out the documentation. You can reach feedback channels, communities, discussions, Q&A forums, the roadmap, and also, of course, the source code. So the relationship here is not just one of use or reuse, but you will use, you will discuss, you will learn from what you are seeing, and you will also influence the way it's being developed with feedback, and you can, of course, at the end, if you want, also contribute to it, because, well, welcome to the party, contributions are welcome, right? But there is a bit of an elephant in the room here, and I want also to ask you to raise your hand if you think that InnerSource could be a detriment to open source. No one? Wow, that's good. Yeah, that's nice, because some people don't agree with you. That was a picture from a very nice open source event hosted by, not seeing if the person is here, but anyway. People from SAP were there. We are Star Wars fans. We put a sticker there on the whiteboard and wrote, may the open source be with you. Somebody came and wrote, and InnerSource 2. And then there, close to that, I think somebody didn't like that very much because they said, hey, InnerSource, my precious, it's mine. So I think that there's still some people in the open source community that think that InnerSource could be a detriment to open source. And I understand that, and I understand that because I have heard comments like, let's not do open source, let's do InnerSource, it's enough to collaborate here. But what I have seen more is I have seen projects that first adopted InnerSource and then they made the transition to open source because they were already used to that way of working, so the transition was much smoother. And I also want to use this image to remind everybody that InnerSource is still closed source, is still proprietary, it's not a new license. There are InnerSource licenses for different reasons inside a company, but it's not an open source license. So it's the same closed source license, but it's more transparent inside a company. And that's why I used the word opaque before and not closed, so that it's not the opposed to open as in open source. Now, a little bit about SAP. Well, everybody said you know it, but I don't think that you know like maybe all these numbers here. 52 years old company, and you can imagine how that history went, but it went from like writing software in assembly directly to the machine, to building a platform for mainframes for application development, to transitioning that platform to client-server architecture, to the cloud, as most of things are today. On top of that, or together with that, we did not only grow organically, we grew organically, but also with acquisitions, and acquisitions bring their own stacks, bring their own culture. So it's like there's a lot of stuff that you can have exchange, but you can also have friction. So you can have difficult collaborating internally. Big company, 109,000 employees more or less across different locations. And we are also specialized in application software for enterprise. This is interesting because it means that we use a lot of our own software, and if you put all this together, you'll see that we have a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities to collaborate internally, to learn from each other, to empower employees to contribute to the software that they are using inside the company. And why are we doing InnerSource, or why we want to have InnerSource in the company? For me, these 3 bullets here are the top, that I think that the reason why we want to have InnerSource. First of all, we want to improve the developer experience and satisfaction, and of course with that, productivity. Because we are empowering the developers to contribute to the tools that they use internally. Also, we want to reduce the time to market, and the way we want to do that is because, of course, if I have a dependency and I have an issue with that dependency and they welcome contributions, I don't want, or I don't need to wait for it to go to like the top of their priority list and I can contribute. So it's not that simple as I am saying, but you get the gist of it. And reduce the cost of development by fostering software reuse. because reuse doesn't just happen, right? Sometimes you find something that you could reuse, but it's not exactly what you need yet, or the documentation is not there and all that kind of stuff. So if it's inner source, if it has transparency, and if you can contribute to the gaps that you see there, maybe then now you can reuse instead of building it yourself. So here, that's something I believe it's also a reason to do inner source. Who is doing inner source in our company? We do have a cross-company working group that is led by the Open Source Program Office, and that's where I work. And this working group is part of a larger cross-company initiative called Cross-Product Architecture that have many working groups for different topics, and we also collaborate with them. Like there is one for managing technical debt, and we see a lot of synergies with the issues that we have with InnerSource. We collaborate with them too. If you want to learn more after when you get the slides that I still need to upload, there is a blog post that we wrote about that. Now, what have we done so far? First of all, knowledge base. We have created this internal website. Does anyone recognize the layout here? So it's MK Docs. It's a static website generation from Markdown. We are, of course, applying InnerSource to the whole content so people can contribute to it. That doesn't mean they do it very often, but it's open for that. There we have a beginner's guide. If anyone in the company doesn't know what InnerSource is and want to get started, they should go there. If they are convinced and now they want to apply it, we have a guide for project maintainers. We have template repository with the stuff that they need to put in their own repo if they want to be InnerSource. We have description of the best practices as patterns, which is something that we adopted from InnerSource Commons, which I'll talk about later. We have a couple of governance models described because that's a very common question that people say, hey, I want to do InnerSource, but well, we won't be able to dump code now, or how does it work? And no, it's not anarchy, and that goes into the last bullet, that is InnerSource myths and concerns. Very important, there's a lot of misconceptions in the company about InnerSource, so it's important to document those. And we actually have one podcast episode about the topic with that guy there, Georg. You were our guest there. And case studies and success stories. This is actually very satisfying to write because we talk to the people that are doing InnerSource and learn from their challenges, learn from what's the benefits, what's the reason, how do they feel about it, and you put in those documents. They serve as a reference when we talk to other people, when we talk to stakeholders, if people are like, does it really work? Well, yeah, we have a recorded experience about that. Now, that knowledge base is maybe not as structured as I would want when giving it to somebody new. So somebody else in the company came up with this idea of a dojo for different knowledge domains, and they contributed to our program by bringing InnerSource into it. We contributed back by making it more like what we expected, so it was a nice InnerSource contribution. And the way it works, we structured it into these belt levels. Like the first one is to understand what InnerSource is, that is the green belt. And then we put there the content that will help people with that. Then if they want to go further and they want to actually practice, they should aim for the red belt, where we put the material on how to practice InnerSource. And if they want to go even further and become an expert and help other people adopt InnerSource or promote InnerSource in the company, then they go for the black belt. And the way it works, which is also very interesting, is that we have senseis like in martial arts, which is of course the inspiration here. And when they want to go for a belt, they need to claim that belt with a pull request describing what they learn, and then we can challenge them, we can have a conversation, we can even learn from their own experience, that's why it's a learning thing based on dialogue. And that URL there you can follow to see an open source version of this, and then the InnerSource part I did with the content that we have in InnerSource Commons, so you can even have this to see how it works. Something else we did is adopting this InnerSource pattern of having an InnerSource projects portal internal. This is not a general purpose developer portal. It's aiming at the problems of promotion and discovery of InnerSource projects. It's very easy to bring your project in there. We just have a crawler that looks in GitHub, and then if your repository has a specific topic, we will show you here, and we'll give you the opportunity to enhance your repository with metadata, and then you can bring it here. We also came up with something called repository activity score to come up with a meta activity score to rank these projects. And we do have a linter, and in this linter, we do then have automated checks based on the things that I showed before, that we have like this guide for maintainers and checklist. This one, we have a presentation about it as well that is linked there. Because time is running out, I will speed up. So this is a summary of the things we did, but there is one thing that is going to be the base for the next section, that is the surveys that leads to where we are. So going into that now, where are we now in the company? So I mentioned surveys. We did 2 surveys so far, actually 3, but one we did 2 times in different years. The last one for developers was in 2023, and we also did one for managers in 2024. And although we have not shared all the results, the structure of the survey we did share. So if you want to do something similar in your company, you can check that link, and you will find it there. If you didn't find it, you can leave a comment. I will make sure that you do. Results about awareness of InnerSource. So 23% of our developers say they know what InnerSource is, and 44% of the managers say they know what InnerSource is. I cannot really explain the difference. We'll find out in the next survey for developers to see if we even it out. Let's see. Now, do you think that's a good or a bad number, like 23%? What do I compare it with? Well, we don't have good numbers to compare with, but there is one number that I usually use it as a base. That is the Stack Overflow Developer Survey. They do have a question about what initiatives organizations have. And one such initiative is InnerSource initiatives. And only 15% of the developers answered that their companies have InnerSource initiatives. And I think that might be a bit of a proxy for that. So if you compare those, I think we are not so bad. I think I even make a bold claim that maybe when we exchange talent with the market, we might be losing awareness of InnerSource. Interest and support. So 88% of the developers are potentially interested in contributing to InnerSource. I say potentially because this is a mix of yeses and maybes. And managers, when we ask them if they would encourage these practices, 96% would potentially encourage both their teams to contribute and to adopt InnerSource best practices. And we asked the managers if they think InnerSource is approach that SAP can benefit from in the long run. 88% said yes. Let's hope that they understand what InnerSource is when they answer that we can know. It's really that's for future research. And we asked them to complete this sentence, that is, will benefit in the long run because, and then there were some options. So these are the top options. So they think it's going to increase developer efficiency. They also expect it to improve cross-unit collaboration and foster reuse, which is more or less in line with the reasons that I have shown in the beginning. Outlook. So we still need to increase awareness, as you have seen, and we want to, we want to do more trainings, and we want to try to assign these trainings automatically to some job profiles. It's not going to be mandatory, but we want to try to scale this without us having to go to people to tell them, hey, do you know this? Do you want to practice this? We also want to create local communities and have champions and ambassadors for promoting InnerSource. We already have that for open source, so we also want to have this for InnerSource. We want to have some pilot areas within the company that commit to adopt this at scale. Currently, we see that the adoption is kind of in pockets, like in the company, and we want like a big chunk of the company to decide, let's do it in here at least to test this out again. Incentivization, we don't know exactly how we are going to do that, but this is something like InnerSource is competing with product management, saying I need this feature, this bug fix, so we need to give them a reason to work also on InnerSource. We want to increase automation with the linter that I mentioned before. And there is one topic that I'm currently working on that's called contributor journey optimization. I'm going to talk about this tomorrow. I think that the name can already give you an idea. And now, if you want to scan QR codes, that's the part. If you want to know more, know more about InnerSource, you should go to InnerSource Commons, big open source community. Although the topic is InnerSource, we act as an open source community. Everything we create is open source. We'll have a lot of learning material there, and you can meet us tomorrow if you want, or you can still join our gathering. Spelling mistake there. And if you want to know more about SAP, then that is where you should go. We have blog posts, we have presentations, and we have podcasts about this topic. So go to url.sap/ospo-publications. And I'm sorry I didn't leave too much time for questions, but thank you very much for your attention. And if you have questions, I'll take them now.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was really wonderful. And you actually have quite a bit of time for presentations.
Really?
Or for questions. Yep.
So the 5 minutes was not the end?
I was leaving you time, my friend.
Oh.
Okay. Speaking of questions, I'm going to go here first than you, okay?
Gotta keep it on schedule.
All right.
Great talk, thank you. Quick question: how do you measure the success with KPI? Except, so you have surveys,
yes.
But then concretely, do you measure the metrics, the KPIs you are using? Do you incentivize on KPIs, or do you have the GitHub stars, or
we don't have many of those yet? To be honest, it's very difficult to come up with something that really makes sense for every project, and we are a bit afraid of coming with KPIs that will not really make sense. So, and as we saw that like the awareness is still a problem, we still were focusing on prioritizing something to improve the awareness, and we are trying to just like make people, hey, let's try to adopt it. That's why we give them tools, we give them the documentation. But once we think we have done everything that we can to raise the awareness, then we'll focus more on measuring the adoption and all those things. We do have some questions in the survey for that, but I'm not sure I can share the results. And you're going to have to sign an NDA.
we don't sign NDAs at the Eclipse Foundation?
Sorry, what?
He said that they don't sign NDAs at the Eclipse Foundation. It's real open source over here.
So I hope everyone else is thinking this as well. Companies generally measure what they care about. And it would be very easy to demonstrate that InnerSource is not a detriment to open source by saying that there's a positive transition from one to the other. But I didn't see anything that you're measuring that is about that. So is that something that you measure, and is it something that you care about?
I care about. I cannot say if the company care about, but we do have like an open source manifesto saying that we want our employees to contribute to open source. We have very good processes that they can follow to contribute to open source. And I don't have that data ready, but we do contribute a lot. So I think that, and I have seen a lot of transitions from InnerSource to open source. So although we don't measure that yet, and I think it's hard because I'd like to have a lot of measurements, but those are costly too. So we need to invest time in the measurement. So that's why we decided to invest on like those trainings, that awareness, that thing, and maybe the measurement will come later.
So one last question from the chat. I'm just going to walk before I talk. SAP also has about 300 public repositories on GitHub. Can you share the thoughts that go into the decision process for whether to choose inner or open source for a given project?
I think that actually it's not a decision about inner or open. It's just a decision: are we going to open it? And we have like a lot of stuff that we give the employees to say, well, if this is not going to be like a commercial advantage and it's something that we want to share with the world, then just follow the process. We are going to take a look. And if there are no red flags, we are going to publish. So just inform your manager if it's really not critical intellectual property, if it's not going to damage our corporate strategy, it goes open source. So we have a lot of open source out there too.
Thank you very much. Very interesting for me. I'm looking forward for your talk tomorrow. The question I'm having is, can you quantize, tell us how much time or how much money you spend per year in InnerSource activities, like central InnerSource activities, what you presented us, the documentation and things like that? Just a rough figure.
Very little. I mean, our OSPO has I don't know, it's a team of 10, let's say, and we do that from within the OSPO, so you can have an idea.
Okay. I think that more or less takes us to time. Y'all were very quick with your questions.